Now, why would a Muslim want to write a book about Jesus? Certainly no Christian has ever written a book about Muhammad. Clearly this must be some kind of Islamic anti-Christian propaganda, am I right? I don't know how many of the folks at Fox News actually read Reza Aslan's book, but I suspect that they had some idea of its contents and wanted to undermine its credibility lest anybody in their audience read it and actually consider its arguments and evidence. This is a book which essentially argues that a lot of the ideas surrounding Jesus' divinity are either exaggerations, distortions, or completely made up. This book places Jesus' teachings and pronouncements in their proper historical context, and makes what I think is a good argument that Jesus was not God incarnate. Rather, he was a Jewish nationalist and revolutionary. He was one of several people who were branded as the Messiah because they sought to overthrow the Roman occupation of Judea and bring about the kingdom of God, which referred to what would essentially be a Jewish theocracy in Judea. As Aslan says, to call Jesus the Messiah, therefore, is to place him inexorably on the path, already well trodden by a host of failed messiahs who came before him, toward conflict, revolution, and war against the prevailing powers. In order for Jesus to be the prophesied Messiah, he would have to be a descendant of King David and be born in Bethlehem. Many of the earliest sources refer to Jesus as being a Nazarene, and none of them mention he was born in Bethlehem. However, in Luke, the Bible claims that Rome ordered a census to be taken that required everyone to return to their hometown to be counted. And it was then that Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem and Jesus was born. The problem, though, is that this was never a requirement for the census. As Aslan says, there is nothing written in any Roman document at the time, and the Romans were quite adept at documentation, particularly when it came to taxation, to indicate otherwise. Luke's suggestion that the entire Roman economy would periodically be placed on hold as every Roman subject was forced to uproot himself and his entire family in order to travel great distances to the place of his father's birth and then wait there patiently, perhaps for months, for an official to take stock of his family and possessions, which in any case he would have left behind in his place of residence, is, in a word, preposterous. But even if Jesus had been the prophesied Messiah, that is no reason to think he was the Son of God, let alone God incarnate. There is one thing about which the prophecies seem to agree. The Messiah is a human being, not divine. Belief in a divine Messiah would have been anathema to everything Judaism represents, which is why, without exception, every text in the Hebrew Bible dealing with the Messiah presents him as performing his messianic function on earth, not in heaven. Another argument that Aslan makes is that the idea that Pontius Pilate didn't want to execute Jesus is obvious horseshit. Pilate had a reputation for being pretty brutal. The idea that people asked Pilate to execute Jesus and he was like, "What? Come on, cut the guy some slack," is really rather ridiculous. Aslan says what Pilate was best known for was his extreme depravity, his total disregard for Jewish law and tradition, and his barely concealed aversion to the Jewish nation as a whole. During his tenure in Jerusalem, he so eagerly and without trial sent thousands upon thousands of Jews to the cross that the people of Jerusalem felt obliged to lodge a formal complaint with the Roman emperor. Aslan argues that the fact that Jesus tried to overthrow the Roman occupation was suppressed because Rome really cracked down on that kind of thing, and the Christians wanted to keep worshipping Jesus. So after Jesus died and people began to base a religion on him, his followers downplayed all the anti-Roman stuff. The most interesting parts of this book, though, are the ones that discuss Paul of Tarsus. Paul was, more than anyone else in the early movement, responsible for spreading the religion of Christianity. However, Paul never actually met Jesus before the crucifixion, and Aslan makes the interesting case that he actually made up a bunch of shit about Jesus, or he had these delusional beliefs about Jesus, like the idea that he was the Son of God, that none of his earlier followers believed. The apostles even upbraided Paul of Tarsus for telling people this shit. It was Greek-speaking Jews who were followers of Paul, rather than the Aramaic-speaking ones who actually knew Jesus, who spread the religion that became Christianity. As they did so, Aslan says, they gradually transformed Jesus from a revolutionary zealot to a Romanized demigod, from a man who tried and failed to free the Jews from Roman oppression to a celestial being wholly uninterested in any earthly matter. The transformation did not occur without conflict or difficulty. The original Aramaic-speaking followers of Jesus, including the members of his family and the remnants of the 12, openly clashed with the Greek-speaking diaspora Jews when it came to the correct understanding of Jesus' message. The discord between the two groups resulted in the emergence of two distinct and competing camps of Christian interpretation in the decades after the crucifixion, one championed by Jesus' brother James, the other promoted by the former Pharisee Paul. James and the remaining apostles even kept telling Paul to stop saying all this stupid shit about Jesus being God incarnate. The Christianity we know today is pretty different from the Christianity practiced by people who actually knew Jesus before the crucifixion. Aslan says, Paul's conception of Christianity may have been anathema before 70 CE, but afterward his notion of a wholly new religion free from the authority of a temple that no longer existed, unburdened by a law that no longer mattered, and divorced from a Judaism that had become a pariah, was enthusiastically embraced by converts throughout the Roman Empire. The historical Jesus and the Jesus that Paul describes seem to be two very distinct entities.